This is your official July 2022 housing market update. Back from vacation is Mr. Steve Frost from National Mortgage Funding. It's been a few months, but welcome back to the show. We've had a lot of people, Steve, say, "Where's that bald guy? We really, he was pretty funny. Can you bring him back, Brandon, to the updates?" And so, how was your 3-month vacation?
It was pretty enlightening. It's an enchanting journey that I was on. And usually I would do a nice hat, so that way we couldn't talk about my head. But I forgot all my formal hats at home.
Hey, that's okay. You're here. Welcome. And we are grateful that you are. So we always appreciate all of your economic insights, which I'm sure we will unpack today. So there is a lot to talk about. And so we are going to get into the July numbers. It took a little longer to get all of our datas, but we have it now. So we are recording this August 23rd. Steve and I will be making these every month moving forward. So we have an official market update for you guys. So let's get into it. So the headlines is all right now about, like they always are, mortgage interest rates, housing sales dropping off, and this battle with inflation, rather. So let's first talk about home sales dropping off a bit. So there's a lot of, just that headlines around, the number of sales are dropping like crazy, and which they have. I think they're down about 20% year over year, and which when you look at that and based on the seasonality, we did about 6.5 million sides last year. So that was about 12 million commission checks. By the way, this year,
I love that stat that you've been using for that now.
Yeah, well, it's true, right? You got two sides to almost every transaction.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and so this year, based on the new seasonality, based on the new reports that came out, based on July's data, Steve, we're going to do somewhere between 5 and 5.2 million sides. So we're still going to have 10 million opportunities to earn a paycheck. But that's the first headline I want to talk about. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you put it in there. The part that you have to look at is the activity, right? So, in the big thing that you read about and that I certainly hear, whether it's on the news, or if I see it on social media, or if it's Gary V, or something like that, talking about like all this doom and gloom in the world. Well, like when you go and not to like jump ahead, but like thinking about like crashes and things like that, like it's so easy that anytime something changes from this dream world that we've had these last 2 years, that also we're like, oh my God, like the worst thing in the world's happening,
Well, that is exactly what the entire market update today that I am prepared to really unpack. And what you said is exactly right. What I believe is happening, and we're going to get into every single stat for all the analyticals, Steve. They love all the stats. So what is happening is this, okay? So when we talk about the number of home sales dropping 20% year over year, well, the next stat we have to look at is home price appreciation. You see, even though home sales are dropping, inventory is rising, home prices are still appreciating, and all the reports suggest that home values will have maybe leveled off and will appreciate 2 or 3 percentage points. But what's really happening is what I'm calling a market. The market is normalizing.
Yeah.
What has happened since I don't even know if you're allowed to say that word anymore on YouTube's, I was told, so I'm not going to even say the whole COV word. You know what I'm talking about, the 19 thing. Yeah. So since that time, over the last 2 years is what I want this entire economic housing market update to be about. Okay, Steve? Mm-hmm. And I want to bring some context around this. So when we look at home price appreciation over the past 2 years, since 2020 to 2022, we saw the highest increase in home appreciation the country has ever seen. In addition to that,
by a long shot, mind you.
Like by a long
crazy long shot.
25, 30, 35, 40% in some markets, with record low housing inventory and record low mortgage interest rates. It was the perfect storm. In other words, what I talked to the agents that I'm coaching right now, Steve, was we hit the real estate lottery. It was literally the perfect storm that has never, ever occurred. And what the market is doing now is normalizing. That's it. So I want to get into some specifics. So the average sales price right now, based on July, is $413,000. That same home in 2020 was worth $329,000. So it's not that prices, Steve, are heading down and you talk about all these price reductions. It's the fact that prices are starting to normalize to where they were pre C19, right?
Right.
And that is what's occurring. It isn't that the market is crashing. It is that the market is normalizing. Inventory is going from about a 30-day inventory over the past 2 years, which we've never seen. And we're sitting right now, I've got the stats right in front of me, just over 3 months worth of inventory. It's called a normal market. It's not normal when
Which
you put a house
foreclosures.
Exactly. The foreclosures, the mortgage applications, so on and so forth. So let's talk, like, what are your thoughts on a couple of the stats that I just threw out there quickly?
So the one thing you're going to see, so I think you're using the median home price, right? And so that number is up a lot. And if you think about, like, what is the median home price, right? It's the average price people are paying for a home. And so as we start to see interest rates rise, we're going to see that average home price go down. And I think that's something that's important for us to keep in mind, and because the news is going to report this as a crash, right?
Yeah.
And anybody that wants attention will, but it's important to remember that these numbers, these median home price numbers have been set during an all-time high for affordability of homes. So as you see interest rates rise and required payments rise, you're going to see people kind of doing a check on how much home they can afford. And you'll see that median home price number come down. But you have to keep in mind, that's not saying your home that's worth $434,000 is now worth $392,000. It's simply saying that there's a certain value, like there's a certain median value for who's buying homes. So that's a big part of it. I also think that something that gets left out a lot is, and nobody wants to dig into it, and I pay attention to it because I'm such a people person, is our buyer pool, right? Like the people that are buying homes right now are these are educated younger people, but they're not like 24 and 25 years old. What was the average first time home buyer? I think it's like 33 years old right now.
Yep.
Which would put you being born in the late 1980s. And, I always go back to those birth charts that show, 87, 88, 89, they keep going up and up. And that's our buyer pool right now. That's the generation that went through college. That's the generation who maybe got a master's degree, or that like the living in mom's basement, like that kind of misunderstood thing. So I still think that looking at some of these numbers that are coming down is in like activity. So you're seeing less transactions happening because this is, again, the buyer pool that we have is very educated, and they're kind of taking a step back and saying like, well, let's see what normalization looks like,
Yeah. And to that point, I want to stay right here on the median sales price. And when you talk about that number potentially going down in the future, I think it is very hypercritical that real estate mortgage professionals, the consumer, understand the context in which the number is going down. And this is the number I want people to take away from this video. We're sitting, like I just said, what is it? We're at 413,000 median sales price. Look at the eyes going to the left. What's texting you over there? You got to get that thing or what?
No, I don't.
Clients.
I wish I could turn it off, but I don't want to get into it.
Why don't you turn it off? Put it on, do not disturb. That's a nice mode. I love that mode.
It's my computer. It's my computer. Yeah. My texts come.
You can put that thing on do not disturb too. This is what you look like, just so you can see. You're like this. I love the eyes. It's so good. And this is all on camera. Anyway.
I love it. That's okay. That's just human nature. We're just being humans.
When we talk about median sales price, we're talking about prices normalizing back to where they were at pre-2020. And they're not even close to that. So if you think about this, right? Because we went up 25 to 30% over the past 2 years. We're talking about prices, Steve, adjusting or normalizing back to close to where they're at pre-2020, but probably more. I give the best example. The house that was worth $329 in 2019, which everybody was like, wow, that's great appreciation. I love the fact that my house is worth so much. They got lucky. They win the lottery in the last 24 months. It's now worth $415. That is not a normal price. So if your house normalizes that same property at like around $350, $375, yes, the news is going to make you think that the market went down 10%. You're still way ahead of the game. That was the point I wanted to make today, is that if you look at the normal market over the past 10, 15 years and where your property is going to be worth in late 2022 and in 2023 moving forward, we almost have to erase the years 2020 to 2022. You almost have to take that out of the data set because it's an anomaly. That's the whole point.
I have that conversation every day about interest rates when I'm like, your rate's 5.25%. And they're like, gosh, I should have done something when they were 3. I'm like, yeah, you could have, or you should have done something. But instead, again, and I've been talking to you for 24 months.
Yeah.
And when interest rates were really low, prices were too high. Well, now prices are coming down and interest rates are too high.
Chicken or the egg, baby.
Yeah.
Chicken or the egg. People trying to
don't
time
get
the
me
market.
Started on rent,
Well, yeah, that's why you and I, time and time again, month and month again, you cannot time the market, because now all those people are like, oh, prices are too high. Well, now the prices are coming down. Now the problem is interest rates are too high. Well, it's like you can't have both, and they're a driver of one another, right? So the other thing I want to talk about, let's move past that point. So we talked about home prices, those probably leveling off, even if they go down, that it's a net positive pre-2020 home values. That's point number one. Point number two, just because Steve and I can get a little out there sometimes, is the time in which it's taking properties to sell. This is the other headline. There's two things at play. There's massive amounts of price reductions. The reason for that is this: home sellers and amateur realtors are pricing property off of the 2020, 2022 real estate market that was an anomaly. They're not pricing property based on the normalization that the market is in right now. So it isn't that, oh, doom and gloom, the market is crashing. It's that our expectations of what the properties are actually worth based on the buyer's willingness to pay has to be pre-2020 values. And this is what I'm talking about all the time. So much so, the data supports this. The second point is the days on market. Let me read this verbatim. Okay, this is right out of the housing report, the existing housing sales report. Okay, this is what MBS Highway uses, what everybody else is using. Properties typically remained on the market for 14 days in July, which was down from 17 days in July 2021, which is the fewest since the National Association of Realtors began tracking days on market in May 2011. So wait a minute, Brandon. Wait a minute, Steve. How can that be? I thought the market was crashing. No, homes are selling faster now than they ever have in the history of the world, even when inventory was half last year. So if a property is priced correctly with the right expectation, the buyer demand is still there, regardless of interest rates, because people are going to buy and sell regardless of what inflation is or mortgage interest rates are.
Yeah. I see it all the time. You're starting to see, obviously, like the price reductions. I'm starting to see some appraisals come in light, like especially on lakefront properties where it didn't matter, so it's almost like a coming back to earth thing, and like you said, it's
normalizing.
There will become a time when people, when the news cycle catches up with the sellers and they start to see what's happening in the market. Like you said, it returns to normalization. Economics return to normal. Housing market returns to normal, and things trade at a normal rate,
Yeah. So we talked about the housing market. Let's shift this into mortgages and more into the economy. Okay. So I have the home sales report in front of me again. And here's kind of what their projections are based on what Fannie Mae and the MBA are saying, Steve. So we hit, it looks like the belief is that we have already seen the height of where interest rates are going to be in the near future. So that's already behind us, is what the MBA is reporting, and that mortgage rates are expected to ease. And based on this report, that by Q4 of 2023, this time, next year, that they're going to be hovering around the mid 4%, which is very normal. What are you seeing with mortgage interest rates and the things that will drive this either further back up or help to ease rates?
So again, so mortgage, the biggest thing that mortgage rates are afraid of is inflation, right? And the reason, and I'll be fast with this, and I promise I won't put everybody.
Don't worry about it.
If I do, sound the alarm,
baby.
Or text me. That'll take me right off course. But so what's happening, and the reason mortgage rates are afraid of inflation. So there's a mortgage-backed security, and there's a 10-year treasury, right? And those are bonds. So right. So Brandon, you have a portfolio. You have some real estate, you have some stocks and some investments, and then you have some bonds and you have cash, right? And so what you do with your bonds, so it's going to be your long-term stuff, like your mortgage-backed securities, your 10-year treasury, is you start to park money in those, knowing you're going to get a very low rate of return, but it's a safe place to park your money, and it's a lot better than having it in a checking account. Checking account, you get 0. Maybe you buy these bonds, some things like that, you get 2-3% return, and over time, it's just a safer place to be, and at least your money's doing something, right?
Yep.
So what happens is, as inflation goes up and the stock market goes up, so stock prices are rising as the price of goods that we pay, right? So all those things start to go up. Companies are innovating. They're borrowing money from the government at no cost overnight. That's the Fed funds rate. They have all this money to hire. They have all this innovation, research, develop money. Stock prices are going up. Well, the last thing you want to do is have your money parked in a mortgage-backed security or a 10-year treasury getting 2 to 3% or some low rate of return, when you could have your money parked over here. Well, Peloton's not a good example of it now, but maybe like your Amazon, or I was going to say Netflix, but I'm like, don't say that.
Don't say that either.
Whatever it might be, right? Whatever robotics company or electronic,
Amazon,
electric car company, right? So those prices are going up. So you're going to pull all your money out of mortgage-backed securities, and you're going to put these during this high inflation, high purchase price time. You're going to park all your money over here. Well, now we have mortgage-backed securities and 10-year treasuries and things like long-term stuff, we'll call it, that it needs to have liquidity in that market. So they need to be able to transact. They need to buy and sell these securities. So what do? Is they come in and they raise the rate of return that you get to draw in buyers. So they're like, okay, maybe we need to get 4% or 5% or these larger rates of return. So what do? They increase the rates to borrow the money, right? So at the very base of that, which is your mortgage rate, increase your mortgage rates. They get sold on the secondary market. You draw in more buyers now to buy these long-term investments, their money. And as inflation is going up, you're going to see these things rise until the Federal Reserve comes in and they raise their overnight rate, right? And they do these different things to tackle inflation. So they're doing, there's like a whole bunch of boring stuff, right? Like balance sheet runoff and all these different investments that the government makes in the mortgage-backed security market. Well, the government kind of pulls out of that and they start to raise inflation. So they're increasing the borrowing cost. So whether it be for these companies overnight or homeowners or whatever it might be, to slow down spending, right? So as they start doing this, and more people are like, oh man, the price of Amazon is going down or the price of Starbucks is going down. I'm going to take some of my winnings out of the stock market and I'm going to go park it back over here, because the mortgage-backed securities and the treasuries, this long-term stuff, they're giving back higher returns right now because the borrowing rates are higher because nobody's investing them. So they're enticing me to buy them. So then they start buying more of these things. So what happens when there's more demand to buy these is that they can lower their rates of return because more people want to park their money there. We start to see interest rates come down. So long term, what they're thinking is that the Fed is going to continue to aggressively increase interest rates for the Fed funds rate, right? Which is the rate pretty much like large companies borrow money. They use it for payroll and all kinds of stuff. So they start to increase those rates to bring down the inflation and bring down the price of goods. And it starts to normalize that market, and we see mortgage rates come down. So at the peak, which was like June 15th, June 16th, there was a CPI number, which is our consumer price index. That's the big gauge of inflation, right? That's the price we pay for stuff. That's like the price of shoes.
It was high. It was crazy.
It was whack. It was
Yeah.
crazy, right? Price of food is crazy.
Yeah,
Gas was crazy. All this stuff was super high. Interest rates, they literally paused. They paused, like nobody bought anything. So they just jacked the rates up. Like there was a day when I priced out a loan at like 6.875 and the guy's like, do we lock? I'm like, honestly, I think we just turned the computer off.
Yeah.
Like, we'll shut it down.
Let me add something just to that point. The July report of closings is simply a byproduct of that time that you're talking about. So 100%. We have seasonality, right? We have seasonality, which every year this time slows down when people go back to school. And what Steve is talking about right now, boys and girls, is a reflection of sales coming down 20%. That huge drop off when interest rates peaked, when inflation peaked, everything kind of chilled. It
stopped.
It stopped.
It just stopped.
That's why July report was so doom and gloom. Sorry, I digress. Go ahead.
And to bring it back here, so just to put it in perspective, so I priced out a loan today for a buyer before I got on this. And so rates have been coming up these last couple of days because it's just the market, right? The market's fluid to like 0.5% right now. So you can go 0.5% a day different. And so we priced that loan out at like 5.25%, and last week I was writing some loans at I did a couple at 4.89, and that's going to be 5% down, like $300,000 loan, 800 credit score, like good clean loan files. We're getting rates in the fours, like not like the 4.99 should be 5, but we're being cute. Like they're getting them down into the fours from almost 7%. So we're already starting to see this stuff normalize and rates start to come back down. And the more that we see this recession tip in, which there's some numbers that are canary in the coal mine, they call it, as we start to see us tip more into that recession, we'll continue to see rates go down.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great explanation of essentially what is happening, what is causing rates to move. But are you in agreement that the height of mortgage interest rates is behind us based on everything the Fed's doing to lower inflation?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
I agree with that based on everything the Fed's doing and the rate sheets that were actually boots on the ground today, it's actually happened, it's starting to come back down already.
Yeah. So that in combination with the next point, I don't know what point we're on. Every single year, I have to remind people that are in mortgage and real estate, like guys, women, boys and girls, every year, as we get into school season, the market shuts off. September showings are going to fall off the cliff. They're going to fall off the cliff for a couple of weeks. It is what happens every single year. And then things start to pick back up. So much so that in many markets, Steve, November, December are some of the biggest closing months of the year when the market picks back up in October. So we
call it Rocktober, baby.
Exactly. We cannot forget about the rolling seasonality of what is happening. Yeah. And the last point that I have on my notes anyway is just to further the annual home price appreciation. The fact is we take the last 2 years, which is a homeowners lottery that everybody in North America won without trying. You didn't do anything. You just won. You some markets as high as 30%, right? Over the last 2 years in appreciation. As those numbers come down and the news reports on the loss, the net positive is still in the positive. So in this graph, which you won't be able to see that well on screen, this is 0, right? So this is home prices going down. The projection, Steve, in Q4 2023 is that appreciation ends up between now and this time next year plus 4% increase in property value. So all the doom and gloom, housing crash, all the negatives, we're talking about the market normalizing, getting back to baseline, a nice healthy market where interest rates are about 4.5%. Inventory is at about 3-4 months worth of inventory. That you list a home and it takes about 30 days. That's called normal. You don't get 74 offers in 2 seconds. If you're working with a buyer or you're looking to purchase a home, you don't have to overbid 75,000 and waive all the contingencies to even have a chance at getting a house. It's normal, right?
Yep.
And that is what we're talking about. And appreciation goes back to being normal, 3-4% a year, not 20% a year, which has never happened in the history of the earth. It's all normalizing. This is the market that we all want to be in. So yet again, at least my ending argument is that this is what I've been waiting for a long time, to get out of this never land of the last 2 years and get into a normal real estate market. So everyone can just relax, take a deep breath, and let things normalize. Your last thoughts?
I agree with that 100%. I mean, this isn't my first rodeo with these cycles. I was here for 2008, right? I was writing mortgages then. And I mean, there was literally I got married on a Saturday, and the Friday before my wedding, I got an $86.11 commission check for an entire month's worth of work, which was like pretty amazing that she still married me. We were way too far in. We gave a deposit, but there's, all this talk of like a housing crash and everything is, and I have this conversation all the time, and even with real estate agents and other mortgage people that I work with, is literally like, you have to understand, like, when you're clicking on that, it's not for the stuff in the middle. It's not for the words. That headline is there for all the pictures on the side. It gets me too. That's where I got like half of my athleisure wardrobe and all that other stuff, is to read the ads on the side, because nobody's going to click housing market normalizing.
Yeah, exactly. It's not sexy.
It's going to fall so far down on the news feed.
Ain't nobody clicking on that.
No one's going to look at it. So my thought is always just always read the data. Even like that jobs report we got at the beginning of August, which blew everybody's expectations out of the water, and a bad day for rates. I mean, so many people, I say, like, just relax, like, let them digest the information. And that was on a Friday. And then Monday we came out, we found that that jobs report included the most part-time and second jobs that have ever been reported on record. So we're hoping to report it, not to get way off course here, and I'm sorry again, but we're looking for 250,000 jobs, right? Was like the number that we're hoping to get. And it came back in at 580 or 528,000 jobs.
Crazy.
Blew it out of the water. But it was literally 303,000 of those were for second and part-time jobs. So you're double counting people because of the economic climate, are working second jobs in order to take care of their family. So there's a lot of, there's always more to it than the headline. So I just always keep that in mind. You're right. It is a normalizing market. Like, there's going to be times where things sit on the market, and it is what it is. But it's normal. That's the good news.
Yeah. And you nailed it. I think context matters. So here's a piece of data, and then we need to compare that to something, right? And give the data context. And when you start to look at that, you say, oh, wow, that's not so bad. So you're saying that 4.5% interest rate over the last 30 years is still on an all-time low of a spectrum? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. You mean to tell me that, like, selling a house in 28 days is actually fast in comparison to the last 50 years? Yeah, it's extremely quick. That is what we're talking about, right? You're talking about my house being worth 5, 6, 7%. You know what I mean? Like, context is so critical. And this retraction of the market, or this normalizing of the market, we have to give it context. And so when you look at everything is still better than it was in 2019 when it comes to house prices and things of that nature. So anyway, that's our official. We kept it under 30 minutes. That is our official July housing market update. Steve and I will be doing these every month. Let us know if this gave you any value, or if this was a complete waste of your time. In the comments, we can take the feedback. Steven, appreciate you like always, buddy.
Thanks, man. You too. Have a good rest of your week.